Hello again, and welcome to more from the world's biggest series of transport events. As ahead of Intertraffic in Amsterdam next month, we discuss tackling tomorrow's challenges, how new technologies pave the way for a greener, smarter, and safer mobility. Now, we all know that Intertraffic is the world's leading platform for mobility solutions and knowledge sharing, helping deliver smart, safe, and sustainable mobility for all. Now, Yunex Traffic are a major part of the event, so later I'll have details of the Yunex Traffic stand in Hall 1, a drinks reception at Intertraffic Amsterdam, and an important panel session. That's to come. But first, let's meet our guests today. We have three from Yunex Traffic, a major participant, as I say, at this year's and every year's Intertraffic. They are Niko Stieldorf, who's head of sales and projects for Urban, the chief strategy and sustainability officer, Diana Willert, and Philipp Hahn, Chief Technology Officer at Yunex Traffic. And we're also joined by the CEO of Aimsun, Dr. Alex Torday, who is an expert on digital twins. Now, before we get into our discussion about how new technologies pave the way for a greener, smarter, and safer mobility of the future, let's just watch this quick video to highlight our mindset shift, where we hear from commuters on and their views about the imperatives of traffic management. And we chatted to these people in Amsterdam.
Meestal met de fiets. En lopend trouwens. Ja.
Just get the tram from where I live. Tram 2, very practical.
Ik loop en ik fiets. Heel graag.
The sidewalks are fairly narrow, making it difficult for people to walk safely.
Ik heb het geduld niet om op de tram te wachten en die drukte.
There are not that many crosswalks, but even when there are, like most people, like bikes or cars, they don't really stop.
The trains and the buses always like to be earlier or later. Make sure the times were always accurate.
Nog een paar extra metrolijnen erbij zou nog wel denk ik goed zijn. Vooral om ook naar de buitenstad een beetje wat meer oplossing te bieden. Ja.
Both the metro and the trams to maybe make it more accessible for people like in wheelchairs.
I do care about that, but seeing that I'm already riding a bicycle, it isn't something I think about too much in my daily life.
I feel like it's very important, like especially during the climate crisis that we're in.
I think it's very important. Of course, people nowadays are more aware of what is green and what's not.
Nou ja, ik denk autorijden duurder maken, op wat voor manier dan ook, is denk ik een hele goeie. Meer elektrisch en meer fietsen. En wandelen.
It's easy to get to any point in the city. Especially getting to the center, there's always like metro lines or like tram lines. So yeah, I think it's good.
I think it is. Like it is more like, it is accessible for everybody to use in some kind of way. So I think it is actually.
The transportation is quite like satisfying. Yeah.
Accessibility is a huge aspect of it. If it's easy to get the information on where your tram goes to, where it stops, if it's on time.
Dat toeristen ook hun auto buiten de stad laten staan.
Maybe in future, like Torday is making hydrogen power or electricity or solar energy.
I mean, I hope that they can come up with more efficient ways to make it safer.
I think it is already there in some kind of way. Like there are a lot of apps where you can find all the information with transportation, where you can buy your tickets and everything. I get to know a lot of people on the trains. I have a lot of good conversation with people sometimes.
Ja, af en toe ontmoet je nog wel eens mensen in het openbaar vervoer, als niet iedereen op zijn telefoon zit te kijken en af en toe ook nog eens een keertje met elkaar praat.
Right, so I just wrote down a few of the notes from there. One of the most difficult ones, and we're going to talk about how we can circumvent that, is a few more metro lines would be nice, was one of the reactions. But other things that possibly technology can help with a little bit more. Timeliness came up, sustainability, and getting people out of their cars by providing a better, more seamless public transport or active travel alternatives. So those were the thoughts of some of the commuters that we spoke to in Amsterdam, of course, where we're going to be in April for Intertraffic Amsterdam 2024. Let's start with Niko. Niko, what's your reaction to what you saw from the commuters speaking to us there?
Thanks for asking, Paul, and thank you for the invitation. You actually said a little bit on the silver plate right here to answer that question. But if we take a level further up here, I think what became quite clear across all the interviewees is we didn't hear from a single person that we need more parking spaces in the city. We didn't hear from a single person, I want my car to go faster from A to C. I think that was where our industry was maybe even 10 years ago still, where the majority of people would have answered such questions. And now we really see firsthand and in a surprising speed, a full-blown, I would call it 180-degree paradigm shift, where we're not anymore focusing on these topics, but actually the very, very opposite, where all the focus and all the requests for improvement are talking about alternative modes and not anymore the single occupancy vehicle. And I'm sure that those are going to be topics that today from multiple different angles we're going to discuss. But to me, that was kind of the overarching theme across all these individuals that you guys interviewed there.
And Diana, from a sustainability point of view, what did you make of it?
Yeah, so the feedback, I really very much like that video because this is what we hear from many typical European cities. It's really about being functional of the public transport, so that we really have not only the bus running, but also that the bus is in time. And imagine a world where the bus is faster than the car. That would be super lovely, and people would be super willing to switch then. But then also when you talk about public transport, we all of a sudden talk about intermodality, so different modes of transport. People can go a certain distance with the bus, but before or after they might pick a different mode of transport. And here people need information really across all these transport modes. And what we heard as well was the topic of safety. People were talking about the pathways, but it's also for the bicycles, super important. So really we hear many people are being willing to switch to bicycles or even do it, but some of them do not feel safe in a city. And this is something we need to tackle and take serious. And not everybody, let me say, is in a lovely city like Amsterdam. There are cities which are not that accessible for bicycles, where you need to go by car or you need to transport something. And here we see more and more people switching to EVs, so electric vehicles. And here, for sure, the infrastructure is needed. We talk about that a lot. But it's also about the availability of the uptime of the infrastructure. So it's not enough that you have a charging station, it also should work. And last but not least, it's important that we don't have congestion. So the traffic needs to flow. This is the most important thing. Imagine a truck really standing on a traffic light. The emissions are really huge, you cannot imagine. So because why is that all important, what I'm saying? We all want to live in nice cities, so make cities really livable, have no emissions there, have green zones, and also have a really good air quality.
And of course, transport makes up anything from a fifth to a third of emissions. So where does technology come into this, do you think, Diana?
Basically in all of them. So really, and maybe I can hand that over to Philipp or Niko, that you talk a bit about from a really technological perspective. But from my perspective, in all of these areas, there is technology in place to tackle it.
Okay, so let's bring in Philipp, who is Chief Technology Officer at Yunex Traffic. Philipp, what are we doing technology-wise? In the video, you heard the gentleman say a few more metro lines would be handy. Now, those are major, expensive, long-term infrastructure projects. Technology can deliver things quicker, cheaper, and more efficiently, can't they?
They can, sure. However, I'm not sure if like the recent emerging technologies help us to, factor down the cost of building a new metro line. But before I go into technology, let me slightly derail a little bit what stands out for me when I watch those videos. And that is really that our consumers of mobility, more or less, the people that live in our cities, they don't differentiate really between different silos or modes of transportation or different means of transportation. I've been working in the wider mobility industry now for 13 years. I've been working on trains, on trams, on metros, on electrifying buses, and also in the traffic industry. But whenever you look into those wider mobility industries, it seems like we're always talking in silos. So when you work on trains, you only talk to train departments. If you work on buses, you only talk to bus departments. If you work on traffic, you only talk to traffic departments. But the people living in those cities, they don't differentiate. They don't know that there's a different department for traffic and a different department for the bus. So that really strikes out for me when I watch this video and when I have conversations also on exhibitions like Intertraffic, also to some extent with students, with commuters, with people of public. And I think there's also a burden, and it's also a challenge at the same time, because we can only make use of technology if we break up those silos. Because in the individual silos, technology has already optimized a lot of things. But the big lever is, as I say, breaking up those silos and looking at mobility more as an overarching, integrated and seamless sort of thing that solves a problem. And eventually that's bringing goods or people from A to B.
And Alex, from a transport modeling point of view, that's something I've noticed over the past few years, is how the idea that as a modeler, you would look at how traffic works. You don't do that anymore. You look at how people move around and the most efficient way for them to do that. And sometimes it could be the car, sometimes it could be the tram, sometimes it could be cycling, sometimes it could be walking, but it's bringing you that holistic approach to the whole of mobility.
Yes, totally. And I would definitely continue on the conversation that Philipp has launched on the fact of today's we have a lot of analysis that are still being done in silos on the way transportation studies and investment are being done, and looked at only one transportation mode at a time. And we have been battling for a long time to have our digital twin that are kind of a testing laboratory for all the different transport stakeholders to be able to have an ecosystem, a holistic view of transportation. But today is still a lot of investments and projects are only done on very isolated, like we would like to predict the impact of a new light rail corridor and not looking at the impact for the rest of the city or even outside of the city. So I think what is very important now is that while we try to serve with our technology a better mobility, we have to look at it on a general point of view, both in terms of efficiency, emissions, but it's very important to make sure that we're not moving the problem for one mode to the other or from the cities to outside the cities. I think we have to have a general approach, and for this we have to have integrated tools that are able to offer a vision of the impact of one specific areas of mobility to the other, and not studying them in isolation. Agreed.
That's an interesting point, because we're very good as an industry to talk to each other and tell each other how clever we are and how great our solutions are. But the wider world doesn't seem necessarily have the mindset that we need to embrace the solutions that we're coming up with. So do you think that we need to do a lot more to get people to be open to new technologies and to transformation?
On my side, I can definitely say yes. I think we are maybe still too much influenced by the past and try to fix some of the things instead of thinking to new approaches. And now we have the techniques, we have especially all the data that are allowing us to have a better understanding of our transport network and the mobility, because at the end, it's very important to go back sometimes to basics of why people are moving around, what is the purpose of the mobility, because sometimes we try to, in my opinion, look too complicated in trying to fix the fluidity of some of the traffic, but what about if this traffic could be unnecessary because there is different ways to minimize the needs to move some goods and other things. So for me, it's really important also sometimes to go back to basics and look at this from a global point of view instead of trying too much to fix some details with technology and missing the big picture, in my opinion.
Thank you for bringing it up. I love what you just talked about, that we're a lot of times in that nitty-gritty detail and not looking at the bigger picture where we want to get. I think our industry is, and this is being self-critical, so anyone listening, please don't feel offended. We are fairly used to come from a very engineering, technical driven side, and we're spending a lot of time thinking, should it be the blue wire or the yellow wire, but not really looking at the bigger picture overall where we want to get. And if we now look at the most modern cities, the most forward-thinking cities, they ask exactly those questions that you right now threw into the room. So what are the problems? Then it's our job to define a solution for it and not finding the customers that have the right problems for the solutions that we have in place, right? And if you look at the likes of, I don't know, Paris and some other of these cities that really take a very holistic approach towards mobility, they ultimately come into what Diana and also Philipp before brought up, that intermodal view of mobility, right? In the very end, if I think of myself, but I'm sure all of you and all of the listeners, I'm thinking every morning, do I put my two boys to take to kindergarten on a bicycle, or do I put them in the car? Do I take the subway? And one day it might rain and my decision might be another one than a day where I want to really save budget, and another one where I need continuous internet because I might be on a call with Diana. So on a day-to-day basis, my needs completely change, and I really don't care what the mode is, but I care if it serves my needs for that specific day. And I think that's a complete, again, coming back to paradigm shift, because I might not care if I take 4 minutes longer, but I need to make sure I have continuous internet, for example. And I think this is a world where we need to get to, and all of that intermodal story that sounds so easy and should be so easy, because that's what we consumers want at the end of the day, requires that breaking up of silos and bringing all these aspects and domains of mobility together into a bigger picture.
It's an interesting one, because sometimes, especially when you take an engineering approach, you look at either the cost of a journey and try and minimize that, or you try and minimize the speed of the journey. But what you've just touched on here is actually that human beings have different requirements. They don't necessarily mind paying a little bit more if they've got slightly more room to get some work done, or they've got internet connectivity, as you say. And so simple things like sticking tables into trains to allow you to work easier on a train is possibly more important than making the train 10 minutes, 15 minutes quicker. It's that sort of difference in how we approach solutions that's going to change the way mobility is delivered.
100% agree. And I think we have already seen it in a few cities that implemented completely free public transport, and the correlation or even causation of making that free did not have the expected outcome that we thought it would have. So maybe monetization is a lever, but there's many other aspects we need to look at.
Let's pick up on the sustainability side of things, because we can't shy away from the fact that all cities face the same challenges as to overcome air pollution. How does intelligent traffic management and, in fact, mobility management support cities reach their smart city and sustainability goals?
Yeah, maybe I start with, and then I hand over to you guys. We talked about the users, so I think this is for sure the biggest point, and here we should dive deeper into. But let me bring up two more topics around that when it comes to reducing emissions in a city. So the user side is the biggest area, but there is also the area of the city itself, where they emit emissions through the consumption of electricity. And if we take, for example, Amsterdam as a city with around 800,000 inhabitants, what do you think, Paul? Because my colleagues know it. How many traffic lights are in a city of that size typically? So average.
I just in my mind's eye, I'm imagining Amsterdam, and unfortunately, all I can imagine is looking in every direction possible as to where a cyclist is coming at me. So consequently, I'm not even going to begin to guess how many different traffic signals there are in the city. You're going to have to tell me.
It's typically around 800 traffic lights. And I don't want to ask you about the kilowatt being consumed by 800 traffic lights around 1 year, but it's more than 700,000 kilowatt hours, above 700,000, which is now, you know, being a sustainability manager for Yunex Traffic, I'm talking in CO2 emissions. It's more than 300 tons of CO2 emissions per year, 300 tons. So how much is that? This is equivalent to nearly 200 households with 4 people living in it. So 200 households, the emissions of 200 households. And here is the first thing where cities super easy can tackle these emissions by just, you know, reducing the consumption. So having more efficient, in that case, traffic lights in place so that they just consume less electricity, and then with that have less emissions. And this also pays off, you know, because at the end you need to pay less kilowatt hours. So even the investment is being paid off quite quickly. So this is the area city can tackle themselves. And then there is an area no one has in their mind when they talk about the emissions of the cities, which is all the suppliers of the cities. So everybody bringing something for the city to the city. So really all the suppliers, also the suppliers of traffic lights. And here, whenever a city is putting out a tender and, you know, doing a contract, they can request from their supplier, or at least start talking with their suppliers, to be compliant with ESG, so environmental, social, and governance topics, being compliant, and putting in place an own carbon reduction plan. And with that, the city would then tackle it really 360 degrees, which is super important. And now I hand over to Philipp or Niko. How can we solve that from a portfolio perspective?
Maybe let me add, because before we go to portfolio perspective, when I thought about Intertraffic, something just came to my mind when you talk about suppliers, because I know, and we've continuous discussions how we can improve our carbon footprint right at Yunex. And it goes so far that even on, you know, executive meetings, we all together jump on the trams or on the trains rather than taking taxis, which I really appreciate and really like. How cool would that be on Intertraffic if an exhibition for mobility and mobility management would, you know, also encourage and reduce taxis? Because obviously from a sustainability perspective, that is not necessarily the best mode to choose. Amsterdam has great public transportation, so it is possible and rather easy to get from everywhere, wherever you are in the city to Rye. So, I mean, that would be also a strong signal, right, in terms of sustainability, to really walk the talk if there could be initiatives at Intertraffic around this. So we might want to talk about that again within our team, how we approach that in April this year. But in terms of portfolio, sure. I mean, you already talked a bit about portfolio or technology that is rather low-hanging fruits, like the direct emissions. Obviously, the next level then is really the emissions and what we create as emissions on the road by keeping cars waiting, obviously. I mean, that's the most obvious part. By having traffic jams, keeping cars waiting, not very efficient throughput through our cities. But here it gets a bit more complicated, because also here my view is in the last 1 or 2 decades, technology has come to a point where we have optimized all major standard technologies we have out there. And we're coming to a point where, you know, all additional optimization doesn't help us too much, or it doesn't gain too much additional improvements, unless we manage the paradigm shift of our industry to a more software-defined mobility infrastructure. So we all come more from a part where we think in hardware, as you said, Diana, about the traffic lights, the LED signals we put in there, all the hardware we have in there. That's all a bit the DNA this industry comes from. And if you take now an analogy to the car industry, also the car industry came from, metal, chassis, brakes, la da 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 da. They are also now talking about the software-defined vehicle, a bit, scared up by Tesla, all these traditional OEMs. But looking at our industry, I like to talk about the software-defined mobility infrastructure. And here we need a paradigm shift, because we all together need to understand what this means to talk about software-defined portfolio and products. And my feeling is here together, partners, customers, vendors, we're all at the very beginning still. So that needs to happen to better understand what it means to maintain software development life cycles and really then achieve, for example, something like an AI-enabled network adaptive control system of the latest generation. But that means you have to play the software game.
Yeah. And with software comes data. And we'll come on to AI, which will definitely be one of the key talking points at Intertraffic Amsterdam this year. But for years, we've been talking about data as the new oil, the new gold. And my question is, are we actually using this vast amount of data we now have as efficiently and effectively as possible? And maybe, Alex, are we using what you can do with it with modeling as well as we could do in cities, or are we still catching up with our solutions based on the tools that we now have?
Well, I would say that definitely in terms of data availability and accessibility, we have improved quite a lot. But the most important is what is the added value that the industry put on top of these data, because you can process gigas and teras of data. If you don't create the innovation on top of these, you are not really taking all the profit out of this data. And for me, the data, first and foremost, is to be able to understand what is happening out there. At the end, in the mobility, there is humans, and we have to understand why they are moving, why are goods moving around the city. We haven't discussed much about the goods, but being able to understand these elements are key to be able to develop the right solutions to get to our objectives. So in my opinion, I think there is, and I'm also the first one to raise the hand, in which we have been too much relying on, we will have a lot of data, AI, machine learning, we crunch a lot of data, get a lot of KPIs, and I think this is really where the end comes to. Now we have to put the human brain back into it and say, and now what do we do? What are the solutions we can improve? The data inform us, but the data are not doing the job for us. And I think that's the point. People were just saying, great, I have plenty of KPIs. And the very important point is like, and what do I do with these KPI? Do I have the courage to start to implement some policies? And this is where you have more like social and political decisions on, okay, guys, we have to do that. We cannot just let the technology decide everything. And the human has also to get back in charge of saying, all these data allow me to understand better what's happening, what is the cause and effect phenomena. So now what do I do? And I think this is maybe where we got a little bit stuck in the industry, where I think we rely too much on the technology and they cannot make decisions for us. Technologies are tools.
But there, Alex, I would like to challenge you a little bit.
Sure.
I understand your comments fully from a planning perspective, but for example, when you say the data will provide us insights, where do you envision a city or a city's operation? So really the city itself, where will they be in 10 to 20 years? And I would love to give my thoughts on that. But first, I would love to hear from you, because you have these swiveling question marks flying, I guess, in every industry. Will AI take our job, and vice versa? Will AI help us fill all these open gaps that we cannot fill? Where do you see that? Because so far you didn't talk too much about the actual help of operations there.
Sure. No, for me, the idea of having these data to feed digital twins that are essentially a digital copy of our transportation network, including people, is really about to be able to help decisions. So it's decision support. It can be for planning in the long term at 20 or 30 years, because as we have been highlighting, we are in a very complex moment of the transportation industry that we are trying to adapt a lot of infrastructure that were planned for different type of mobility, mostly car-driven, and we have a lot of work on repurposing our infrastructure to the new paradigm, but also for the short term. So it's a decision support for operation, and this is where obviously technology and AI and machine learning and models can help to accelerate actions in case of roadworks, incidents, and all these aspects. We can now calculate much faster how to optimize the current availability of capacity in our transportation network instead of always being reactive. So it allows us to anticipate way more and to optimize the different resources, all the way going to the energy resources, not purely in terms of capacity, as we have always been thinking on it. But now, back to you. What is your idea?
Yeah, I'm sitting a lot in front of customers, right? And usually what we try to do as the very first step is say, what are your challenges? And of course, we come with a backpack full of amazingly sexy technology that we want to make quite sexy to that city. But then the first things that you get from them are topics like, we have bought a system 8 years ago, and since then it's fairly static, right? Which to all of us as modern consumers of software and of platforms sounds very strange, which I think is going to be the first drastic shift we need to get to, is to get into like a more dynamic environment where also a city can react there and a workforce can react to that. And second of all, I think it will even start with little effects. Like you sit in front of a city and they say, I again had to manually create a report that correlates that, and coming back to Philipp's comments before, I don't know, the tram data together with the air quality data, because I have no system that does that. So it's not yet the sexy topics that we're talking about right now. It's that manual labor that we see day in, day out that consume the workforce of a city, and who say, I don't find any traffic engineers, I don't find any operators, I have drastic lack of capacity, of resources. I can't hire anyone in the current market. And I think AI will help us take away a lot of these daily operational tasks, allow cities to get into a much more strategic position to really start adjusting these KPIs, and starting, which I think is a natural process in such a digitalized world and the speed of innovation that we see, is outsource certain topics and say, dear AI or dear certain external company, take care of these and these aspects. I'll move myself more into a strategic position than the current manual topics. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Great. I don't know, Diana or Philip.
Yeah, Philip, we haven't heard from you for a while, so if you'd like to pick up, and then I want to then take it back to the customer again, but we'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I was about to say, Paul, we took over your show here, but that's how we are, quite enthusiastic about the whole topic, aren't we? It both rings a bell for me what you've said, Alex, and also Niko. First of all, the observations that, you know, sometimes we implement projects and we get so far, but then we have some insights, and then what? So I've seen that quite a lot as well. On the same time, Niko, I've seen also and observed quite a lot that we maybe that buys into the same issue or problem statement. Stay busy together with our customers with the operational day-to-day duties to also not get, you know, to the real innovation, real game changers, and maybe the real strategic levers. I think what we need to strive for is to liberate our customers and to work together to get rid of this constant burden of keeping infrastructure up to date, because that is something I observe in the day-to-day business, what keeps most of our customers busy. Hey, I've outdated hardware, I don't have enough budget, I don't have enough people to re-engineer the intersections. Similarly, on the software, I have a traffic control system which is outdated, I want to build some functionality on top, but it's not possible because I'm on version X and that has been deprecated, So I think that is really a major challenge that we need to overcome together with our customers in the whole ecosystem of ITS, to overcome this constant fighting to keep infrastructure up to date, just to keep the lights on, to get into this next level of groundbreaking innovations. And that comes back to, again, and I'm also, again, really enthusiastic about that topic. It has a lot to do also with software and play the software game and play it right. But here we need to talk more, engage more in the entire industry and understand what that means. And here I also observe in the daily business that we sometimes struggle to even talk about internet accessibility of our systems, which, but I mean, on the one hand side, we want to have a interlinked cooperative mobility management. On the other hand, we struggle to give internet access to such a system in order to connect those systems. So that is operational day-to-day challenges. I'm trying to make this now explicit in an example. And this is where we need to accelerate. That is topics we need to solve faster, issues we need to solve faster to come to a level where we can get rid of that operational, tactical, daily burdens in order to really work on the strategic, groundbreaking, next level levers to improve our mobility in our cities. Yeah.
Can I just touch quickly with you on the customer? Because in our case, in this conversation, there are kind of two separate sets of customers that we've got to consider. We've got the authorities that are buying the equipment and doing the management. They're one set of customers. And then the others are actually the traveling public. How much, when it comes to data and the latest travel information that we might get, how much is it that it should be put in the hands of the overall end user to make their decisions? And if that's the case, how do you get them to actually use the latest technology as efficiently as possible? Or how much should it still remain with the authority to actually be doing the holistic approach and kind of nudging the traveling public into going the way and using the mode that is most efficient?
Thank you for bringing that question up. I think data, in the very beginning, you mentioned data as the crude oil, right? And what we're kind of all trying to figure out since probably decades is we know mobility is that crude oil, but nobody really has found the holy grail of how do I turn that crude oil into that magic gold that everybody's looking at. First of all, what I deeply believe in and what Yunex Traffic is deeply believing in is the data that we generally aggregate in an environment and via technology paid by the taxpayer is owned by the taxpayer. We are big believers in the topics of open innovation. So the field of smart city and mobility being one critical component of smart city is such an attractive and smart environment. And we can't talk about breaking up the silos if we're the first ones stopping that. So we're the very first ones saying, please make use of that data. Please start collaborating with it. Please invite us and we'll gladly help you and work with you to see how you can generate value adds on top of that data. If you've ever seen, Paul, the actual raw data, I think the value add for me to decide if I take the bike or the car in the morning will be fairly valueless. Somebody needs to do that crunching. Somebody needs to create the value adds. But I think before we get there, I see, and again, I'm talking about sitting in front of a lot of the cities on a day-to-day basis. I see one massive challenge that we have here. And that is specifically since the Ukraine war, and I'm right now a little deterring, but everything we're going to talk about is data exchange, right? We're looking at a status quo where a lot of cities are completely shut off their critical infrastructure. It's either even air-gapped, meaning they have an actual wire is not connected to the internet, and somebody needs to walk 5 days a week to that office to operate it, which is already a challenge for them to find talent. And it completely defeats the purpose of that vision that we're all drawing. So that's the status quo. And now when we look at the new world has connectivity written all over. Right? And if we talk about V2X or CCAM or CITS, whatever term we want to use there, if we talk about open innovation, if we want to talk about public APIs, if we talk about intermodality and multimodality, all of that screams exchanging data. And on the other hand, we see an exponential increase of IT risk on critical infrastructure. So that means cities to move further need to accept to be online and to allow a huge multiplier of nodes of individuals to interact with their critical infrastructure while their risk level, again, specifically since the Ukraine war on critical infrastructure, goes up drastically. And now they look at this huge gap. Okay, how do we fill that gap? Because the answer cannot be to stay offline. And I think this is the first answer we need to bring to the table and provide those value adds to cities before then the consecutive conversations can start how we make best value of that data in the public environment.
And if I can continue on this, Niko, because and to come back also to the question Paul has raised, what we have experienced in the past is that this question of the ownership of the data sometimes comes to, in my opinion, I'm sorry to be so direct, but sometimes in a nonsense situation where people will say, okay, so this is my digital twin of the city, this is your digital twin of the city, but it's the same city. So why everybody wants to create their own set of data and information and representation of a transportation network if there is only one transportation network out there? I think we are in a moment that we have to accept that there is multiple stakeholders, private, public, individual people that are the commuters of a system. There is a lot of company out there that move goods and things around that we often forget because as a commuter, we don't see them. They operate during the nights. They use a lot of the transportation network. All of these people are using the same transportation network. So what we are really a strong believer is in a collaborative manner on using this data in which everybody is chipping in any information they have. You as a commuter are telling, I'm going from there to there, and I want this information to serve people, to serve myself better. So I'm not afraid of sharing this information. And ideally, you want to do this on a unique, true representation of your transportation network so that every actor can bring information in and take learnings out of this platform. But unfortunately, still today, but it's really improving. It's really improving. But still today, we have a lot of procurement mechanism from public government, which is like, well, I would like to build this, but it's mine. And the departments that is just next door will build their own data sets or their own platform. And I think as provider, Yunex, Aimsun, all, we're like, guys, just talk to each other. There is one transportation network out there. Let's do this together. Co-investment, multiple stakeholders, we can do this together. If we each of us work independently, I don't think we will solve the equation. That's clearly one of the aspects. And the software framework that and paradigms that Philipp was bringing before makes so much sense to me.
And if I may add to that, Alex, we were talking silos earlier on, and you were describing silos now. I think next to really edge, cloud, AI, this is now also the moment in time for a new era to have a platform in traffic management. So really have one platform where everything is in, and then where you can build on, and then really serve all stakeholders out of that one platform.
Fully agree.
Before we finish, I want us to all go back to the days when we were students and go back to the exam question that I gave at the beginning of this webinar, which is that we're talking about tackling tomorrow's challenges and how new technologies pave the way for a greener, smarter and safer mobility. We've kind of ticked off and talked about greener. We've talked a lot about smarter. Where does safety come into all of this?
I can come in because I have one standard use case that I like a lot to also explain why I believe technology helps us to overcome issues or challenges we've had for decades, and the time is now where emerging technologies helps us here. Because especially in the area of safety, again, I believe the standard technology that we see in our industry has come to a point where you cannot do that much more. You can do maybe a bit smarter safety analytics, but to protect road users on street, it's where we are, and we more or less leave it a bit more to the automotive industry again to try to protect with interesting, measures on the cars. However, there's, for example, one use case, and there's many more. This is like the blind spot warning. That's a problem. That's an issue we've seen on the streets for decades, and we've tried to solve it. And I've seen quite curious attempts on trying to solve it in cities around the world with special mirrors and other things, but none of them really helped. Here, technology can really help us. We don't have only loop detectors anymore. We have advanced perception. We have video. We have object recognition. We can understand if there is a near miss or if there's going to be a hit of a bike rider in a truck. And we even have technology to transfer this information directly into the truck. So actually, it's all there. And my heart is bleeding if I see that it's really difficult to get it out on street. Again, because we're occupied with a lot of tactical operational things. And here we really need to accelerate, because I really believe that technology is there to come to the next S-curve of safety on our roads, fueled with, as I say, and that's a mix of technologies. That's now cloud, IoT, machine learning, in addition with vehicle-to-X communication, which is all standardized and all there. And we could prevent a lot of dangerous situations, accidents, and maybe even fatalities on road if we make use of the technology that is there. So that is definitely a thing where we again need to accelerate, where we need to talk even more and create the preconditions to get this out on road.
So, Philipp, would that be your key takeaway from our discussion, or what would you really like somebody watching this to think about and to share when they're working and in their day-to-day lives?
I mean, safety is really maybe something that is a topic that might wake up a couple of people. But generally speaking, I think there's not just safety, but also the other aspect we've touched today on. And I think what I would really appreciate is everyone watching now this webinar, but also everyone attending the exhibition and also engaging with us, customers, vendors, partners, we all need to engage more deeply in aligning and jointly understanding the preconditions and the impact, what this software-defined mobility infrastructure really means. And we've touched on this, but really this is not an incremental development for me. This is a transformation, and it will enable the next S-curve in our industry. But it requires investment, time, new understanding, new learning from all different parties to really overcome the complications in that, and really then enable also what is possible with technology, with the solutions we have today, with the solutions that are yet to come. So really my key takeaway is we need to engage and jointly understand and learn about this new software-defined mobility infrastructure.
I cannot agree more with Philipp on this joint usage, collaborative usage of the software platform and the technology we have together. A strong believer on having a collaborative vision of the transportation network. We today are able, thanks to this data, the mathematical model, simulation model, etc., to offer a very accurate representation of the cause and effect phenomena. So with this platform, if we work all together in developing new ways and better decisions on how to manage mobility together and not independently, I think we are in this collaborative era that is very promising and that can bring a lot of positive at all different levels.
Sustainability and mobility is not a contradiction. So for me, this really goes hand in hand, and we have all in our hands. So it's really all available. We don't need to wait until tomorrow. We can really start today. And if I may ask the cities what they can do already today, start engage with your suppliers. Low-hanging fruit, don't go green, really do green.
Perhaps to sum that up, can only agree with all the statements that my three colleagues made. I think the last important point that we need to bring in is cities need to accept that we have to get into a more dynamic environment. That comes with me hand in hand with what Philipp described. If I give you the last decade of mobility, we had Ubers, we had micro scooters, we had a global pandemic. If we look at how, on average, a central platform used to be procured over the last 50 years, it was usually 10 to 15 years. Who could have planned for any of these things, which were massive disruptions to cities' mobility environment? And such disruptions will just become faster and more frequent. So cities need to come on a journey, need to select vendors that are willing and have the manpower to take them on that journey and get into an environment and use vehicles, even contractual vehicles, to have that dynamic. Because neither us nor anyone else listening knows where we're going to be with our mobility in 10 years. And therefore, it's going to be a fun and exciting ride. And cities need to be able to tap into all that potential that is out there.
Thank you very much indeed. We're out of time, but before we go, let me just say that we've learnt a lot in the last 45 minutes or so about how the public and private sector can work together to make our cities more sustainable. The conversation will, of course, continue at Intertraffic Amsterdam, which takes place from the 16th to the 19th of April 2024. Do come and join Yunex Traffic on its stand in Hall 1, booth 327, and I'll mark your card for drinks on the first afternoon at 4 p.m. Plus, there's a really interesting panel session where this conversation will continue. It takes place on the 17th. That's Wednesday between 4:30 and 5 o'clock in Theatre 1. It's called Unlock Tomorrow, AI Cloud Mobility, Fad or Fundamental Shift. Now, in this panel discussion, they'll be diving deep into the dynamic landscape of AI, edge and cloud technologies and their potential to revolutionize the future of mobility. So as we gather industry leaders and innovators from multiple sectors of the transportation ecosystem, we'll explore the critical question, can the fusion of AI, connected data, edge computing and the cloud truly address the pressing challenges of global mobility while moving us towards sustainable and efficient mobility solutions? That'll draw on a wealth of expertise with panelists analysing the current landscape, examining the possibilities and confronting the limitations of these technologies and solving the question, are the new technologies fad or fundamental shift for tomorrow's mobility? That's 4:30 on the Wednesday of Intertraffic Amsterdam. So that's for the Wednesday at Intertraffic. I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. Thanks again to our guests, Niko Stieldorf, who's Head of Sales and Projects Urban at Yunex Traffic, Dinah Willert, the Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer, Aimsun's CEO, Dr. Alex Torday, and Philipp Hahn, Chief Technology Officer, also at Yunex Traffic. So do share this recording, please, with your colleagues and associates as we share the thought leadership around how technologies will pave the way for greener, smarter, and safer mobility. Bye for now.